A most dangerous game. A most dangerous game was played by Hayden Duran, his pawns, Sydney Park, and Jesse Duran. This game came to an end on August 18th, 2010. Sydney Park, Andy, and Lee Park lost this game. At the beginning of trial today, Mr. Sample came before you and stated the park's actions could have prevented this accident. And now I come before you at the end of trial today, and I say that Hayden Duran's inaction caused this terrible accident. In the months leading up to August 18, 2010, Hayden Duran saw the warning signs and the risk factors. Hayden Duran even shared with his friends that he was concerned over the violent video games and media Jesse was exposed to. He had seen the drawings that Jesse had made. He received warnings from Danny Brooks, the park's babysitter. He had also received disciplinary notices from Jesse's school. For these reasons, today we have brought the complaint of negligent parental supervision. Members of the jury, this simply means that we had to prove that Hayden Duran should have reasonably foreseen the actions of their child, Jesse Duran, and that resulted in the harm to Andy and Lee Park's daughter, Sydney. In order to bring negligent parental supervision, we had to prove two elements: that Hayden Duran had control over Jesse, and secondly, we had to prove that Hayden Duran could have reasonably seen the risks that Jesse had posed to other students and friends. And we met those two elements, members of the jury. First, we proved that Hayden Duran had control over Jesse because he is the sole parent and guardian of Jesse. And secondly, we proved that it was reasonable to have foreseen the accident that occurred on August 18, 2010. They had the risk factors, they saw the warning signs, but they did not act. Now, we had to prove 5 elements to show negligent parental supervision. First, we had to show that Hayden Duran reasonably knew that it was her responsibility to protect her child, for her to be aware of what was going on in her child's life and realize that her child desperately needed help. And she breached that duty, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Secondly, we had to prove that she breached her responsibility and duty to explain the dangers and risks of firearms use by minors. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, she breached that duty by not explaining properly to her child the risks involved with firearm use by minors. Third, we had to prove that it was Hayden Duran's responsibility to notify Andy and Lee Park that Jesse was having problems with violence and may have posed a risk. Hayden Duran did not do that, and she therefore breached that duty. Last, we had to prove that Hayden Duran knew that Sydney and Jesse were going to be alone that day, and that she should not have left them alone. Ladies and gentlemen, we proved that Hayden Duran knew that there was no babysitter there that day, and still left her child with Sydney Park in the home with a weapon. She knew that weapon was there. She knew that her child needed help, but ignored those risk factors. It was as simple as she could have taken off the day, and we would not be here today. Now, the defense has chosen to pursue an affirmative defense, that they had to prove that the Parks were just as liable, if not more, than she was. And they failed to do that today, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. The plaintiff has proven by a preponderance of the evidence that it was more likely than not that Hayden Durand's actions caused the incident that occurred at the Parks home on August 18, 2010. 50% plus a feather that it was more likely her responsibility and her fault. Today, we heard from a number of witnesses. First of whom we heard from Danny Brooks, the Parks babysitter. She came before you and explained that she had realized herself that Jesse was prone to violence in violent video games. She had heard Jesse talking about the gun in the Parks home. She expressed those concerns to Hayden, but Hayden ignored those concerns. We then heard from Jules Sebastian, who explained that the firearm was in Jesse's hand when it was fired, killing Sydney Park. We then heard from Campbell Solo, who explained that the warning signs and risk factors were evident to Ms. Hayden Durand. And we have also shown that Ms. Hayden Durand ignored those risk factors and warning signs. We then heard from defense witness Terry Chapin, the Parks neighbor, who first responded to the Parks home. The previous night she had been out drinking, she had barely slept, and also medicated herself the morning of. She, as a matter of fact, could not recall whether the incident took place 3 months ago or 4 years. We then heard from Ash DeRosa, who stated that the Parks did not meet all of his safety standards in his test. Well, the Parks bought the best safe and stored it in a reasonable location. They had the combination written down, unmarked, in a reasonable location, and they bought a weapon from a reputable dealer. Now, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the Parks met most of the criteria that he listed. And lastly, we heard from Jessie Durand. Jessie stated that she thought that something might have been off with the gun, with the firearm, but that she wasn't sure and just wanted to play the game. Ladies and gentlemen, please find Hayden Durand liable for negligent parental supervision. Thank you.